Let me start off by shattering a common misconception among finance and accounting professionals. If you pay a supplier twice, most automatically won't return that second payment. That's right, they don't nicely return the money. That's why it's critical that you recognize the games or practices that devious suppliers use to get you to pay them twice. Some of these practices are used legitimately, making it difficult to identify the devious suppliers who are trying to take advantage of you. So let's take a look at some of their devious practices and what you can do about them. Questionable tactic number 1. They send duplicate copies of the same invoice to many different people. The real simple answer here is you can ask them to stop. Number 1. You can set up a special email address where they send invoices and invoices only, and invoices should go to that address and that address only. Now, this will work some of the time, but some of your vendors will continue to send the multiple copies because at the end of the day, what they want is to get paid, and they feel this increases their chances of getting paid. And since it's so cheap to send email, it doesn't cost them much. So you really need to stay on top of this. Some companies are now getting 25% of their invoices sent twice. So really it is an important issue because your team spends a lot of time weeding out these duplicates and hopefully not paying them. Questionable tactic number 2. Even suppliers who normally don't send duplicate invoices will go ahead, just sending you the one invoice. And then a few of the less than honorable ones, if you unintentionally pay them twice, they'll discover that, oh, if we send this company duplicate copies of the invoice, sometimes they'll pay them twice and we'll get that money. So then they start sending you copies of invoices more than once all the time when they weren't doing it before. These are the ones who I say they're less than honorable. They're trying to trick you into paying them twice. And again, you can ask them to stop, but many of them won't if this is really their ulterior motive. Questionable tactic number 3. They send that second copy of the invoice with a completely different invoice number. Now, maybe they are within their rights to send that second copy of the invoice because you didn't pay them on time. Maybe there was a dispute on the invoice, there was a discrepancy and you were trying to get it resolved and it took a little bit of extra time, so you didn't pay them by the due date and they went ahead and sent another copy to try and get paid. But now the second copy, when it comes in, it has a completely different invoice number. So what some companies do is they'll send the first invoice, it'll be invoice number 12345. And then when they send that second copy trying to get paid, the invoice number is 12345A. And then if they have to send a third one, it's 12345B. And when you ask them about it, they say, well, we do this so we can track exactly when you paid and which invoice you responded to. And I guess there is some logic to that. You might talk to your own receivables, your billing and receivables people, and see what your organization does to see if that makes sense. Those duplicate invoices are fairly easy. Not easy, but they're easier to find. The problem comes in when an organization, when they send the first invoice, it's invoice number 12345, and then when they send the second invoice, it's number 7896 or something like that. There's no correlation, making it very difficult to find. And when you talk to the companies about it, as I have, they come up with all different reasons about why they do this. I'm not sure they make a whole lot of sense, at least to me, but at the end of the day, this is their practice. And you can talk to them about it. You can ask them to stop. But the likelihood of them stopping this practice because you ask them is very slim. Because after all, they might have 4,000 or 6,000 or 60,000 or even 600,000 customers. And you telling them you don't like this practice is going to be insignificant. That's why we say it's really, really important that you do a lot of duplicate payment checking even after the fact, and why we make such a big deal about getting statement audits and looking for vendor credits and all sorts of stuff like that, because it's really hard to catch these. All right, moving right along. Questionable tactic number 4. They call up or they email demanding payment. Now, sometimes it's legitimate. You haven't paid them on time. They may be a small supplier. They may have their back to the wall. They may really really need that money either to make payroll in an extreme situation or just to pay their own vendors. And so you haven't paid them, you are late, there was either a problem with the invoice, or maybe you're just, kind of stretching payments. And so they're aggravated, they're frustrated, and so it is a legitimate call. But that's one side of the coin. It could be that. The second side of the coin are those unscrupulous, and I'm going to call them unscrupulous now, suppliers who know that if they call up and they demand and they harangue, and especially if they berate a processor, a low-level processor, sometimes they can talk them into paying. And they will do this either to get them to pay early, or sometimes to pay a second copy, so that in effect they're calling up and demanding payment when they've already received that payment, and what they're doing is now getting twice. I would call that fraud. You may or may not agree with me, but at the end of the day, whenever somebody is calling up and demanding and they're being really nasty about it, you need to take a good, cold, hard look and see, is this legitimate? Do they have a right to be angry? Do they have the right to be upset? Or are they trying to get us to pay them when we really don't owe them any? Oh, by the way, in these instances, sometimes it is a completely fraudulent invoice that they're trying to get paid. Okay, if you're getting any value from this talk, we'd really appreciate it if you'd hit the like button. It helps us grow this channel. Questionable tactic number 5. They send a second copy of the invoice on the due date or a day or two before the due date. There are some cash flow consultants out there advising companies to do this. They tell them that they should do it so that to remind you to pay, to make sure that the customer knows that it's time to pay. They act like they're doing this as a favor to you when they're not. It's not a favor. It's creating extra work, and in some instances you'll end up paying twice. And in my humble opinion, that's what I think they're trying to do. I think they're trying to get you to make a duplicate payment. So anytime you get an invoice where the due date is either today or a day or two down, look at it very closely, do some extra double checking to make sure that it hasn't already been paid. Now, some of these practices that I've been discussing are used by legitimate companies when they're, the way they're operating their receivables. So you need to be really careful, and you need to be always checking to make sure that you haven't made duplicate payments. Not only that you want to weed out the duplicate copies of the invoices, but you need to review your payments as well. As you can probably tell from this discussion, efficient and effective invoice processing is critical to avoid getting some of those legitimate second invoice copies. So that's why we compiled a short list of quick tips to help you meet that goal of being more efficient and effective in your invoice processing. You should watch it right now using the link that has appeared on your YouTube screen and is in the description. Good luck.